Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everybody. Children are sponges. They see everything, they hear everything, they mimic everything that you do. My daughter is 21 months old, and she is very much in that frame of mind. She loves to mimic and do everything that my wife and I do. Um, a lot of times, a lot of times, her mimicking are at very inopportune moments. Say, for instance, we'll be going for a walk, and she'll be stopping to pick up every twig or look at every blade of grass, and one of us will get frustrated, and we'll make a sound. It'll be something like, "Ah, come on, let's go!" And my daughter will just hop up and run down the sidewalk, going, "Ah, ah, ah!" So she's learning to mimic us. And then there's another time where my wife and I are talking, and a comment is made that I thought the appropriate response was sad trombone. I think everybody knows this sound is the wah wah. Well, as soon as I said it, my daughter goes wah wah and proceeds to make this noise for a while for the rest of that day. Well, thinking about these particular situations has got me to start thinking a little bit more about what did I learn as a child? What lessons did people around me teach me? And my grandfather is a person that immediately jumps to mind. My brother and I spent a lot of time over at his house growing up. And probably about the time I was 8, my brother and I went over at least weekly, if not multiple times a week. And typically that meant that my brother would be outside mowing my grandfather's grass. And I, of course, would want to go out and help. Well, there wasn't really another mower for me to mow, so my grandfather would give me a rake and have me start raking twigs. So I'd go out and rake up a pile of twigs and go over to my grandfather and say, "Hey, I'm done. What do you want me to work on next?" And his response would be, "Are you sure? Let's go check it out and see if you missed anything." And sure enough, there would be a few twigs laying on the ground that I missed, and he would point those out, and I would go over and rake those up. Well, there's a couple of lessons from this. One is the value of hard work. Work hard, work fast, get your job done so you can move on to something else. But the job's not actually done until you've gotten everything complete. So he also was teaching me attention to detail. A couple of things that I didn't realize at the time, but I understand now, and they've actually come in very handy in my adult life and over the last year, all the years I've been alive. Another story is one of my favorite stories of my grandfather. About the same time I was 8 years old, and I had just learned a new phrase, and that phrase was, "That's a bunch of baloney." Well, my grandfather, being the person that he is, was giving me every opportunity one morning at the breakfast table to say that phrase. He would say something that I found slightly ridiculous, and I would just respond, "Well, that's a bunch of baloney. That's a bunch of baloney." I said this probably a dozen times throughout the course of that breakfast. After breakfast was over, I'm laying on the floor playing with a toy, and my grandfather walks over to me and dangles a slice of bologna in front of my face, and I just look at him dumbfounded, like, what is going on? And his response was, "Well, you talked about bologna so much during breakfast, I thought maybe you wanted a slice." And that was my grandfather's humor. And in that moment, I didn't realize it, but he was teaching me the value of humor. There's always something to laugh at. There's always something funny in every situation. You just have to find it. Well, thinking back a little bit to to stories of my daughter and things that she's learned or that she's learned from me and things that she's done, it's just kind of reinforced that my daughter is learning from me, even though I don't know or I don't realize that I'm teaching to her. Because an example of this is, remember that sad trombone sound that I told you earlier? Well, my wife and I were sitting around the table eating dinner one night, and my daughter was there as well. And I made a comment, and my wife responds with a very sarcastic response back. And before I could say anything, my daughter just goes, "Wah, wah." In that moment, I realized my daughter is learning humor from my wife and I. And not only is she learning humor, but she's also learning when to use humor, because she realized that the comment that was made, the sad trombone sound, was the perfect response to that comment. So my wife and I are cracking up as I'm realizing this. but it's just something, it's something just to kind of keep in mind. Whenever you're with a younger generation and you're talking, or whenever you're with a younger generation, just kind of keep in mind what things are they learning from you in that moment, because they're watching and they're taking notes, and you might just realize they learned something that you didn't quite realize you were teaching at that moment. Thank you, everyone.